We need $50,000, Raymond. Your son needs this money.
I am not giving you.
Then don't expect to be part of this family anymore.
You told a 7-year-old boy that his grandfather was dead.
I did what I had to do to protect my family.
I have the text messages, I have the voicemails, my lawyer has everything.
You wouldn't dare take this to court.
Watch me.
My grandson called me on a Tuesday afternoon and asked me why I didn't come to my own funeral. He was 7 years old. His mother had told him I died. Drop your city and state in the comments right now, because I need to know other grandparents have survived something like this. And please subscribe to this page, because men like me deserve to be heard. My name is Raymond Calloway. I'm 71 years old. I live in Billings, Montana. 8 months ago, my son's wife Diane came to my kitchen and asked me for $50,000. She said they needed it for a business. She had a printed plan and everything. I read every page. The numbers didn't add up. I told her I couldn't do it. She said, Raymond, if you loved your son, you would help him. I said, I love my son. That is why I won't watch him sink $50,000 into something that won't work. She left without another word. 2 weeks later, my son stopped returning my calls. Then my daughter-in-law blocked me on every platform. I thought maybe they just needed time to cool down. Would you have loaned the money just to keep the peace? Comment yes or no below. Then my grandson Tyler called me from a school friend's phone. He said, Grandpa Raymond, are you a ghost? I said, what do you mean, son? He said, Mama told us you died. She said that's why you don't come anymore. I had to sit down. My grandchildren had been told I was dead. For 2 months they believed their grandfather was gone. I called my son immediately. He didn't answer. I drove to their house. Diane opened the door and told me to leave before she called the police. I stood on that porch and told her I would be back. With a lawyer, she laughed and closed the door. That was the last mistake she made. My lawyer sent a formal letter the following Monday. Parental alienation, emotional harm to minors, documentation of every blocked call and unanswered message going back 8 months. My son called me that same evening. He was crying. He said he didn't know she had told the boys I was dead. He said he was sorry. I told him I believed him, but sorry wasn't enough anymore. The case goes to family court next month. My grandsons know I'm alive now. Tyler asked me if I was really coming back. I told him Grandpa Raymond is not going anywhere. So tell me honestly, if your grandchildren were told you were dead, would you take it to court or try to handle it privately first? Comment below. And if someone has ever used your grandchildren against you, write I understand. Subscribe to this channel. Share this with every grandparent you know, because no grandchild should ever be told their grandfather is gone when he is still standing. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand how a grandmother can tell her children that their living grandfather is dead. Because this story didn't start 8 months ago when Diane asked me for $50,000. This story started 32 years ago when I held my son Marcus in the hospital and promised him I would be the kind of father my father never was. I was 39 years old when Marcus was born. My wife Claire was 37. We'd been trying for 8 years. 8 years of disappointment. 8 years of tests and doctors and hope that kept dying. And then Marcus came, our miracle, our only child. I remember holding him in that hospital room and making him a promise. I promised I would work hard so he'd never go without. I promised I would be present so he'd never feel alone. I promised I would teach him to be a good man, and I kept those promises, every single one. Claire and I raised Marcus in a small house on the edge of Billings. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard where we built a treehouse when Marcus was 6. I worked as a foreman at a manufacturing plant. Claire worked part-time at the library. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And we had each other. Marcus was a good kid, respectful, curious, kind to animals and other children. He loved fishing. Every summer, I'd take him up to the Yellowstone River and we'd spend the whole day out there. Just me and my son, talking, laughing, building memories. Those were the best days of my life. When Marcus was 12, my wife Claire got sick. Ovarian cancer, stage 3. The doctors said they'd do everything they could, but it wasn't enough. Claire died 6 months after her diagnosis. I was 51 years old, a widower, with a 12-year-old son who'd just lost his mother. I didn't know how I was going to do it alone, but I didn't have a choice. Marcus needed me. So I worked, I cooked, I cleaned. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every basketball game, every school event. I was both mother and father, and I was exhausted, but I showed up every single time. Marcus graduated high school with honors, got a scholarship to Montana State, studied business. I was so proud. My son, the first person in our family to go to college. I helped him move into his dorm, helped him set up his room, and when it was time to leave, I hugged him and told him I loved him. He said, "I love you too, Dad. Thank you for everything." I drove home alone that day, back to the empty house, and I cried, not because I was sad, but because I'd done it. I'd raised a good man. Marcus met Diane during his senior year of college. She was a year younger, studying marketing. Pretty girl, blonde hair, always dressed nice. Marcus brought her home for Thanksgiving. I tried to like her. I really did. But there was something about her that felt off. The way she looked at my house, the way she commented on everything. "You still have the same furniture from the 80s? This carpet is really outdated. Don't you think it's time to renovate?" I smiled and said, "It works for me." But I felt judged, like I wasn't good enough. Marcus didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. He was in love. They got engaged 6 months after graduation. I offered to help pay for the wedding. Not much. Just a few thousand. Diane said, "That's sweet, Raymond, but my parents are handling it." They had the wedding at a country club in Bozeman. 200 people, open bar, live band. It was beautiful, expensive, and I felt out of place the entire time. Diane's family had money. Her father owned a car dealership. Her mother didn't work. They lived in a big house with a 3-car garage, and they looked at me like I was beneath them. During the reception, Diane's mother asked me what I did for a living. I said I was a foreman at a manufacturing plant. She said, "Oh, how nice. So you work with your hands?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, 40 years now." She smiled that fake smile and said, "Well, someone has to do that kind of work." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. After the wedding, Marcus and Diane moved to Billings. They bought a house, a nice one, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage. I helped them move in, carried boxes, assembled furniture, painted the guest room. Diane barely said thank you, but Marcus did. He said, "Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." I said, "That's what family does." A year later, Marcus and Diane had their first son, Tyler. I was at the hospital when he was born, held him when he was 2 hours old. He had Marcus's eyes, and I fell in love immediately. I promised Tyler the same thing I'd promised his father. I would always be there. I would always show up. I would always love him. 2 years later, they had another son, Jacob, and my heart doubled in size. 2 grandsons, 2 boys I would do anything for. I saw them every week, took them fishing, taught them how to ride bikes, read them bedtime stories when I babysat. They called me Grandpa Raymond, and every time they said it, I felt like the richest man alive. But over the years, I started noticing changes. Diane controlled everything. When I could visit, what I could bring, what I could say. She'd correct me in front of the boys. "Raymond, they don't need more sugar. Raymond, don't let them play so rough. Raymond, they have a schedule." I bit my tongue because I wanted to see my grandsons. And if putting up with Diane was the price I had to pay, then I'd pay it. But it got worse. Diane started asking for money. Small amounts at first. "Can you help with daycare this month? Can you cover the boys' sports fees? Can you pitch in for new school clothes?" I always said yes, because I wanted to help. But the requests kept getting bigger. $500 for a car repair, $1,000 for a medical bill, $2,000 for a family vacation. I gave what I could, but I started to feel like an ATM, not a grandfather, not family, just a source of money. Then 8 months ago, Diane showed up at my house unannounced. She had a folder in her hand. I was in the kitchen making coffee. She said, "Raymond, can we talk?" I said, "Of course, have a seat." She sat down at my kitchen table. She opened the folder and pulled out papers. A business plan. She said, "Marcus and I are starting a business, a consulting firm. We need startup capital." I said, "How much?" She said, $50,000. I almost spit out my coffee. I said, "50,000? She said, "Yes. We've done all the research. This is going to be huge, but we need investors, and we thought of you first. I said, let me see the plan. She handed it to me. I read every page. Revenue projections, expense estimates, market analysis. It looked professional, but the numbers didn't make sense. The expenses were too high. The revenue projections were unrealistic. And there was no mention of how they'd handle the first year when most businesses lose money. I said, Diane, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't invest in this. Her face changed. She said, why not? I said, the numbers don't add up. The expenses are too high. The projections are too optimistic. I'd be throwing money away. She said, you don't believe in Marcus? I said, this has nothing to do with Marcus. This is about business, and this business won't work. She said, how do you know? You're not a businessman. I said, I've worked for 40 years. I've seen businesses come and go, and I know what failure looks like. She stood up. She said, Raymond, if you loved your son, you would help him. I stood up too. I said, I love my son. That is exactly why I won't watch him sink $50,000 into something that will fail. I'm protecting him. She said, you're sabotaging him. I said, I'm being realistic. She grabbed her folder and walked to the door. She said, you're going to regret this. I said, I don't think I will. She left. And I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. Then I tried calling Marcus. Voicemail. I tried again the next day. Voicemail. I sent him a text. No response. I figured he was busy. Or maybe Diane had told him what I said and he was upset. I gave him space. But a week went by. Then 2 weeks. Then a month. Still nothing. I tried calling Diane. Blocked. I tried messaging her on Facebook. Blocked. I drove to their house. No one answered the door. But I saw the curtains move. Someone was home. They just didn't want to see me. I left a note on the door. Marcus, I love you. Please call me. Dad. He never did. Another month passed. I called the school to ask if I could pick up Tyler and Jacob for the weekend like I used to. The secretary said, I'm sorry, Mr. Calloway, but your name has been removed from the approved pickup list. I said, what? By who? She said, Mrs. Calloway, the mother. I said, but I'm their grandfather. She said, I understand, sir, but without parental permission, I can't release them to you. I hung up, and I felt panic rising. Diane was cutting me out, completely. I didn't know what to do. I drove to their house again. This time, I knocked for 10 minutes. No one answered. I left another note. Please let me see my grandsons. I miss them. I love you all. No response. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A small voice said, Grandpa Raymond. I said, Tyler, is that you? He said, yeah. I said, buddy, where are you? Are you okay? He said, I'm at school. I borrowed my friend's phone. I said, why? Where's your phone? He said, Mama took it away. I said, why? He said, because I kept asking about you. My chest tightened. I said, what did she say? He said, Grandpa, are you a ghost? I said, what? He said, Mama said you died. She said you're in heaven now. She said that's why you don't come to visit anymore. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I couldn't speak. Tyler said, Grandpa, are you there? I said, I'm here, buddy. I'm here. He said, so you're not dead? I said, no, Tyler, I'm not dead. I'm alive. I'm right here. He said, then why did Mama say that? I said, I don't know, buddy, but it's not true. Grandpa Raymond is alive, and I miss you so much. He started crying. He said, I miss you too, Grandpa. Jacob misses you too. We thought you were gone. I was crying too. I said, I'm coming to get you, Tyler, I promise. I'm going to fix this. He said, Mama's calling me. I have to go. I said, Tyler, wait. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone. My grandchildren thought I was dead. For 2 months, they'd been grieving me. And I was alive, 10 miles away. I called Marcus immediately, straight to voicemail. I called again, and again, and again. Voicemail every time. I got in my truck and I drove to their house. I didn't care if they called the police. I didn't care if they had me arrested. I was seeing my son. Today, I pulled into their driveway. Diane's car was there. I walked up to the front door. I knocked hard. I heard footsteps. The door opened. Diane stood there. She said, what do you want? I said, I want to see my son. She said, he's not here. I said, his truck is in the driveway. She said, He doesn't want to see you. I said, I just got off the phone with Tyler. He said, you told the boys I was dead. She didn't even blink. She said, I told them what they needed to hear. I said, you told them their grandfather was dead. I'm standing right here. She said, you're dead to this family. I said, you can't do this. She said, I just did. Now get off my property before I call the police. I said, call them. I'll tell them you're emotionally abusing my grandchildren. She said, good luck proving that. I said, I have Tyler on record. He called me. He told me what you said. She said, a 7-year-old's word against mine, please. I said, Diane, I'm warning you. Let me see my grandsons, or I will take this to court. She laughed. Actually laughed. She said, go ahead, take me to court. You'll lose. You have no rights. I'm their mother. I decide who sees them. I said, we'll see about that. She said, yes, we will. And she closed the door in my face. I stood there shaking, not from fear, from rage. I got back in my truck. I drove straight to a lawyer's office. His name was Paul Hendricks. I'd used him years ago for my will. I walked in and told the receptionist I needed to see Paul immediately. She said, do you have an appointment? I said, no, but this is an emergency. She said, let me check if he's available. 5 minutes later, Paul came out. He said, Raymond, what's going on? I said, my daughter-in-law told my grandchildren I was dead and she won't let me see them. He said, come into my office. I told him everything. The $50,000 request, the rejection, the 2 months of silence, the phone call from Tyler, the confrontation at the door. Paul listened carefully. Then he said, Raymond, this is parental alienation and it's serious. I said, can I fight it? He said, absolutely. Grandparents have rights, especially if you've had an established relationship with the children. I said, I've been in their lives since they were born. I saw them every week until 2 months ago. He said, good, that helps. I'm going to draft a letter to Diane and Marcus, formal notice. If they don't allow visitation, we'll file a petition for grandparent visitation rights. I said, how long will that take? He said, it depends, but we'll move fast. I'll send the letter tomorrow. I said, thank you, Paul. He said, Raymond, these cases can get ugly. Are you prepared for that? I said, I don't care how ugly it gets. Those boys think I'm dead. I'm bringing their grandfather back. Paul sent the letter the next day. Certified mail. Legal notice. Demand for visitation. Threat of court action. Diane signed for it on Thursday. And on Thursday night, my phone rang. Marcus. I answered immediately. I said, Marcus? He was crying. He said, Dad, I'm so sorry. I said, sorry for what? He said, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she told the boys you were dead. I said, you didn't know? He said, no. I thought you were just mad at us. I thought you didn't want to see us anymore. I said, Marcus, I called you 100 times. He said, Diane said you were being manipulative, that you were trying to guilt trip us. She said it was better to cut contact. I said, and you believed her? He said, I don't know what I believed. I was confused. I was stressed about money, about the business, and Diane kept saying, you didn't support us. I said, I don't support a bad business plan. That doesn't mean I don't support you. He said, I know, I see that now. I said, Marcus, she told Tyler and Jacob I was dead. Do you understand that? Your sons think I'm gone. He said, I know, I confronted her. She said she was protecting them from the confusion. I said, protecting them? She traumatized them. He said, I know, Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I said, let me see them. This weekend, let me tell them I'm alive. He said, Diane said no. I said, Diane doesn't get to decide that anymore. I have a lawyer. I'm filing for grandparent visitation. He said, Dad, please don't do that. We can work this out. I said, how, Marcus? She blocked me. She lied to your children. She won't let me in the house. How are we supposed to work this out? He said, give me some time. Let me talk to her. I said, you've had 2 months. I'm done waiting. He said, Dad, please. I said, I love you, Marcus, but I'm not backing down. Those boys deserve to know their grandfather is alive. He said, I love you too, Dad. I said, then prove it. Let me see them. He didn't respond. I said, I'll see you in court if I have to. And I hung up. 2 days later, Paul called me. He said, Raymond, we got a response from Diane's lawyer. I said, what did it say? He said, She's refusing visitation. She claims you're a negative influence, that you undermine her parenting, that the children are better off without you. I said, that's bullshit. He said, I agree, so we're filing a petition, family court. We're asking for supervised visitation to start. Then we'll push for unsupervised. I said, supervised? He said, it's standard in these cases. A neutral third party will be present, just to make sure everything goes smoothly. Once the court sees you're not a threat, they'll grant unsupervised visits. I said, when? He said, hearing is in 3 weeks. I said, 3 weeks? Paul, those kids think I'm dead right now. He said, I know, but this is the fastest I can get it on the docket. I said, fine, do it. Over the next 3 weeks, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Tyler and Jacob, wondering what they were thinking, wondering if they missed me, wondering if they'd even remember me by the time I saw them again. I drove by their house twice, just to see if I could catch a glimpse of them. Once I saw Tyler in the front yard, I slowed down. He looked up. For a second, I thought he saw me. But then Diane came out and called him inside, and he was gone. The day of the hearing arrived. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to Marcus's wedding. Paul met me at the courthouse. He said, remember, Raymond, stay calm. Don't let Diane get to you. Let me do the talking. I said, I'll try. We walked into the courtroom. Diane was already there, with her lawyer. A sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. Marcus was sitting next to Diane. He looked miserable. He glanced at me. I nodded. He looked away. The judge came in. A woman in her 60s. She looked tired, like she'd seen 1,000 cases just like this. She said, this is a petition for grandparent visitation. Mr. Raymond Calloway versus Mrs. Diane Calloway. Paul stood up. He said, Your Honor, my client, Raymond Calloway, is seeking visitation with his 2 grandsons, Tyler, age 7, and Jacob, age 5. Mr. Calloway has had an active relationship with these children since birth. He saw them weekly until 2 months ago, when Mrs. Calloway cut off all contact. The judge said, why was contact cut off? Diane's lawyer stood up. She said, Your Honor, Mrs. Calloway made the difficult decision to limit contact because Mr. Calloway was undermining her parenting and creating conflict in the home. Paul said, that's not true, Your Honor. Mr. Calloway was cut off because he refused to give Mrs. Calloway $50,000 for a business venture. The judge looked at Diane. She said, is that true? Diane's lawyer said, Mr. Calloway's refusal to support his son's business was part of a larger pattern of control and manipulation. Paul said, Your Honor, may I present evidence? The judge said, go ahead. Paul handed her a folder. He said, this is documentation of every phone call, text message, and visit attempt Mr. Calloway made over the past 2 months. All unanswered, all blocked. We also have a recorded phone call from the grandson, Tyler, in which he states that his mother told him his grandfather was dead. The judge's eyebrows went up. She said, excuse me? Paul said, Mrs. Calloway told the children their grandfather died, when in fact he is very much alive and desperate to see them. The judge looked at Diane. She said, is this true? Did you tell your children their grandfather was dead? Diane's lawyer said, Your Honor, my client was trying to shield the children from confusion and stress. The judge said, by telling them their grandfather died when he's alive. Diane said, they kept asking why he wasn't coming around. I didn't know what else to say. The judge said, you could have said the truth. Diane said, I was doing what I thought was best for my children. The judge said, ma'am, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've never heard of a parent telling children a living grandparent was dead because they didn't want to explain a conflict. Paul said, Your Honor, this is textbook parental alienation. Mr. Calloway is a loving grandfather who has been erased from these children's lives through no fault of his own. The judge looked at Marcus. She said, Mr. Calloway, you're the father, correct? Marcus said, yes, ma'am. She said, did you know your wife told your children their grandfather was dead? Marcus said, no, ma'am, I found out 2 weeks ago. She said, and what did you do about it? Marcus said, I confronted her, but I didn't know how to fix it. She said, "You could have called your father. You could have set up a visit. You could have told your children the truth." Marcus didn't respond. The judge looked at Diane. She said, "Mrs. Calloway, I'm ordering supervised visitation to begin immediately. 1 visit per week, 2 hours, at a neutral location. A court-appointed supervisor will be present." Diane's lawyer said, "Your Honor, we object." The judge said, "Objection noted and overruled. These children have a right to know their grandfather, and Mr. Calloway has a right to see his grandchildren. We will revisit this in 60 days to assess whether unsupervised visitation is appropriate." Diane looked furious, but she didn't say anything. The judge said, "Court is adjourned," and she left. I looked at Paul. He smiled. He said, "You won." I said, "When can I see them?" He said, "The supervisor will contact you this week to set up the first visit." I said, "Thank you, Paul." He said, "You're welcome. Now go get your grandsons back." The first visit was scheduled for the following Saturday at a community center in Billings. I got there 30 minutes early. I was so nervous I couldn't sit still. Then I saw them, Tyler and Jacob, walking in with Diane. Tyler saw me first. His eyes went wide. He said, "Grandpa Raymond?" I said, "Hey, buddy." He ran to me, threw his arms around me, and he cried. He said, "You're not dead. You're really not dead." I said, "No, buddy, I'm alive. I'm right here." Jacob ran over too. He said, "Grandpa, you came back." I said, "I never left. I've been here the whole time." Diane stood in the corner with her arms crossed. The supervisor, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, said, "You have 2 hours. I'll be right over there if you need anything." I spent those 2 hours on the floor playing cars with Jacob and reading books with Tyler. They told me about school, about soccer, about their new dog, and I listened to every word like it was the most important thing I'd ever heard. Because it was. At the end of the 2 hours, Tyler said, "Grandpa, are you coming back?" I said, "Every week, buddy. Grandpa Raymond is not going anywhere." He hugged me again, and I didn't want to let go. That was 4 weeks ago. I've seen them every Saturday since. And in 2 weeks, I go back to court. Paul thinks the judge will grant unsupervised visits, maybe even overnights. Marcus has started calling me again. He apologized. Over and over. He said he's working on things with Diane, that they're going to counseling. I told him I hope it works out. But I also told him I'll never trust her again. Because you don't tell a child their grandfather is dead and get to walk away like it didn't happen. Tyler still asks me sometimes if I'm really alive, like he's afraid I'll disappear again. And every time he asks, I tell him, "Grandpa Raymond is alive. Grandpa Raymond is here. And Grandpa Raymond loves you more than anything in this world." So tell me, if your grandchildren were told you were dead, would you fight in court or try to handle it privately? Comment below. And if someone has ever used your grandchildren to hurt you, write "I understand." Because I see you, and I know how much it hurts. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story with every grandparent who needs to hear it. Because grandchildren are a blessing, and no one should ever take that away from you, not even their own mother. If this story touched your heart, if you believe grandparents deserve to be in their grandchildren's lives, type "Amen" in the comments. Because Tyler and Jacob are back in my life, and I thank God for that every single day. If you're a grandparent who's been kept from your grandchildren, type "Amen" and believe that God will restore what was stolen from you. If you believe that truth always wins in the end, type "Amen." And if you're praying for a family member who's been lied about, alienated, or cut off from the people they love, type "Amen" for their restoration. God sees what was done in the dark, and he brings it into the light. Tyler and Jacob know their grandpa Raymond is alive, and that's all that matters. Type "Amen" if you believe God restores what the enemy tried to destroy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for caring about stories like mine. May God bless you and your family, and may he protect every grandparent from the pain of being erased.